Thank you very much, and thank you for having us today. I was just saying, I went to Kiel University, and my university certainly didn't look like this with the views, so I feel privileged to be here, so thank you all for joining. My name is James Sutcliffe. I'm the founder and CEO of the Founding Network, and effectively, we're a community of over 1,000 of the most innovative founders across London, New York, Berlin, come on in, guys, who we effectively bring together to collaborate on whether it be sharing challenges, advice, contacts, whatever it takes to help them scale as efficiently as possible. And it's quite amazing to see what people can achieve actually when they're working as part of a group that is like-minded but suitably diverse. So that is something that's been a massive passion of mine, building that community. Just so you know, the way we work commercially is we then work with some of the world's biggest brands who share insights and learnings with our communities. Companies like TikTok, Oracle, Microsoft, those types of companies is how we work. And I'm sure, like many of you, no worries, come on in. Growing up, I was always a massive fan of some of the business and startup shows and films that were on TV. But actually, one real issue I have with it is the way they glamorize entrepreneurship to a point where it certainly doesn't reflect my life and not the founders that I spend all my time with. So last year, what we decided to do as the Founder Network was to actually go out, pick 15 of the founders from within our network and spend real time with them. So many of them, we spent time at their homes with their families, we spent time at their offices with their teams, and we interviewed all of them. And it created a very real, but also a very raw picture of what life as a high growth founder is really like. And I'm sure, as many of you have got to know, it's certainly not all ping pong tables and beer o'clock. It's quite a view. So for us, it's all about not just the mindsets and the ambitions, but actually what are the sacrifices that come with founder life. So essentially what we did was we created the show that I always wish existed. So what we'll do is we'll share the trailer with you, and hopefully it will give you a bit of an idea as to what the Founder Network is all about and what we do. It's tough enough starting a business to meet the needs of today's world. But it's a completely different mindset when a founder expects the world to change around them.
Hi, I'm Tess.
Phil. I'm Aman. Steve.
Kyle.
I'm City.
Charles Tabner.
And my company, Remedy Health.
Scoot.
Warpaint.
Why Hangry?
Agoli Media is changing the world.
Get ready to learn more about yourself than you do about anything.
When you're as obsessed as I am about it, it does consume you all of your waking time.
You've got to prioritize and you've got to compartmentalize.
It did absorb a lot of my life. It was all negative feedback. Came the next day to the office just crying.
That was the first time I'd probably felt scared.
Sometimes I sit in the bottom of my shower and I cry because at the end of the day, you can't share it with anybody.
So why are you doing this? Why not just get a nice, comfortable 9 to 5?
A comfortable 9 to 5 job would be my idea of hell.
The objective is to change the world.
It's about sustainability and leaving behind that legacy.
In about 20, 30 years' time, there are going to be maybe 5 or 6 companies which pretty much run the solar system. We could be the biggest company of the 21st century.
It is such a privilege to be doing this.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
I know. So hopefully that gives you a good idea as to the type of founders in our network and of course what they're going through as well. So today what we wanted to do, I'm joined by Caroline and Albert as well. We wanted to come in and just share a bit about the realities of founder life. So what we'll do is we'll each talk for sort of 5-10 minutes, and then we'd love to do a bit of Q&A. So literally take the conversation wherever you guys would find most useful. And I suppose just to give us a bit of context for the session, who here, just by show of hands, has already started a business? Okay, cool. And of those, who plans to do that business beyond this course? Okay, good number. Cool. Okay, well, look, we'd love to share a couple of learnings and a bit about our businesses. So I suppose just to kick off, and I'm sure for many of you, you've been told plenty of times, the best time to start is now. And I'm sure people have been drumming that into your head for a fair while. And look, I know it's not the right time. You're on a course, you've probably got a dissertation, you've got exams, you'll have graduation. You might end up in a job after that to pay the bills, and that brings plenty of pressure itself. The issue is it's just never the right time. And I was caught up in that myself. So 2.5 years ago, I was debating whether to start a business, which turned out to be the Founding Network. I had a job I loved. I had a big promotion coming up, had a baby on the way, and on top of all that, there were murmurs of a pandemic about to hit our shores as well. So for me, I, again, was in that mindset of, is it the right time? And then I suddenly had the realization that actually it was the hardest point in my life to start a business, but actually it's the easiest it will ever be. So to put it another way, if I waited another couple of years, maybe we'd have a second baby on the way, which we actually do now. Maybe that means we need more space and a bigger mortgage, which traps you. The promotion's great, you get a bigger pay rise, but actually as much of a blessing as that is, actually traps you into the company as well. So look, I'll repeat it again and try apply it to your own lives. I guarantee it will fit for most of you that it is the hardest point in your life to start a business, but it is the easiest it will ever be. So have a good think about that and see if that works for you. But I think once you've decided to take that leap, I think it's just about living with intent. So whether you've got the right business idea right now or not, I think just start paying attention to your own lives. Like, what are the pain points within your own lives, or what bugs you? Maybe solving those is the business that will take off for your career. So have a good think about that. And then, of course, the other thing is I'm a massive advocate for building your own network. Look, you are at one of the best universities in the country. And while you're paying for your education, the networking is absolutely free. And I think the best part about that is the university's done all the hard work for you. They brought a lot of the best minds together in one place, and they've even divided it up into different courses, so you know who's interested in finance, marketing, legal. So do make sure you use this time while you're on the course to actually get out there and speak to different people as well. I think that's just a huge advantage that you can use at the minute. So please do that. And then again, once you've started your business, I think you need to be completely rigid and completely flexible. And by that, I mean, when you're starting the business, know what your purpose is, know why you're doing it, and never waver from that. And at the same time, know where you're going as well. Where do you want the business to end up? What do you want to achieve? What is the impact you want? But I think, and I'm sure you guys will agree, everything between needs to be completely fluid. Things will happen that are completely out of your control. Certain things will go better than you ever dreamed they would, but it will be a real mix, and it's not the easiest feeling, but one you have to get used to, and just know that you need that flexibility between the 2 points. So I think one thing that does make that a little bit easier is just experimenting. It's something that I push at the Founder Network all the time with our team is we just need to try new things all the time. And the reason I call them experiments rather than tests are you need to treat it like an experiment. Have a hypothesis, limit the amount of time that you'll actually do the experiment and know what pass-fail looks like for that experiment and put a limited cost on it. I think if you're really smart with that, what you'll find is over time, you'll end up with a handful, more than enough failures within it, but with limited time and cost implications. And the ones that are real winners will be winners tenfold. And I think that's how you see some of the best businesses really progress. So I think Jeff Bezos recently came out with a similar thing where he was effectively saying that their rate of success at Amazon is down to the number of experiments they do per year, per week, per day. So it is something I'd consider for your own businesses now and whatever you go on to launch following the course as well. And the other thing to say is if you have that mindset is to celebrate all the experiments, whether they're a pass or fail, celebrate them all, because if you're doing enough of them, you will get winners in there. I have a good friend that has the same mentality, and they did this where they did 10 experiments, and pass or fail, they'd have a big party at the end of it, right? So every time they did 10, and the first time they did this, they had a big sushi party and everyone got food poisoning. So that bit didn't go down so well, so they put that as their first experiment for the next block, but I couldn't recommend that highly enough. And then just one thing that I've been working on that fits that a lot recently is keep looking and monitoring the things you know as fact. So the personas of your customer. So this is something you need to constantly monitor. And for the most part, it won't change that much. But actually through the pandemic, I think most, especially consumer businesses, have seen that change enormously. Suddenly you've got what's termed the workday consumer. So people aren't just working 9 to 5 solidly on whatever their job is. Actually, they're doing little personal bits. And actually, while they're doing that, they're on desktop. So that idea of being mobile first all the time isn't necessarily right. So even the things that in your mind you know as fact, I think you just need to keep rechecking. And with personas themselves, I think you need to check that every time you look at your marketing budget. near impossible to set an effective marketing budget if you don't know accurately who you're going after and how to get in front of them. So I think both those points are massively important. So look, just to finish off, I hope you all do check out the trailer. Now you've seen the trailer, check out the full documentary. It's on founderschangingtheworld.com, so do take a look at that. I think one of the most inspiring things about it is the practical challenges of running a business are so apparent. We see them every day through team management, legal, marketing, whatever it may be. But what's not so apparent are the challenges that come personally for founders. So when you think the mental toll on it, the strain on relationships, the constant stress and anxiety, but actually for me, what is so impressive and inspirational about that is every founder that we speak to still says it's completely worth it to pursue the purpose of their business. And as you heard Tess say at the end of it, they wouldn't have it any other way. So we feel honored at the Founder Network to help them in any way we can to help them scale as efficiently as possible. So thanks for having us, guys. I will pass over to Caroline.
I ran a business for 21 years, founded and ran a business for 21 years, which I successfully exited in 2017, and thought that that was great. It was a business to business. We were a creative agency, production company. We helped some of the most fabulous and amazing cities and countries in the world secure the rights to host Olympic Games, World Cup soccer, World Athletics, some of the biggest and most amazing sports events, and in fact the Dubai Expo, cultural events around the world. We had an amazing reputation. We were in the press. I got inducted into the Olympic Hall of Fame. It was fabulous, but it was unpredictable. The sale was unpredictable. Everything to do with that business was unpredictable. It was one of the most satisfying and enriching periods of my life, and during one of the most formative periods of my life. I started the business when I was 28. God, I'm aging myself now. I'll let you do the math. But when I exited the business, I felt that I wanted some sort of stability and predictability in my life. I was also just coincidentally going through a divorce, which was a casualty of my 21 years of obsession with the business and my crazy travel schedule and never being home and everything else. And I decided I was going to go and have a sabbatical in America and spend 3 months learning to fly a plane and sit on a beach and then contemplate life, the universe and everything. And then I'd just sort of take things easy and I'd get some non-exec positions and do something very grown up and sensible. Took me 11 weeks to get a pilot's license. Took me a further 3 weeks to get 3 non-exec directorships and a further 3 weeks to realize that that was my idea of hell. The idea of sitting in a boardroom with, and by the way, one of those where I'm still a non-exec at the England Cricket Board, and we created the 100. If any of you are cricket fans, I was on the 100 board, and that was one of the most incredible experiences. But the whole idea of sitting in a boardroom and opining on things that will either not or will be executed by a team of people that you don't have a day-to-day embedded deep relationship with is enormously frustrating. And I think probably is the one thing that differentiates entrepreneurs like all of you and people who do pursue those sort of C-suite roles where they play a role within somebody else's playbook. And that I think is something you either love or you hate. I definitely fall into the latter category. So I started to think about what had frustrated me and what the least predictable things about my previous business had been. When I sold the business, I didn't sell it as a going concern. We had, over the 21 years, created 15,000 hours of content, video content. We were famous for our films, and we owned the rights to 12,000 hours of that 15,000 hours. So I sold that 12,000 hours of underlying content. For those of you who are conversant in film language, it was the rushes, the original graphic plates, all of the bits and pieces that sat behind animations and so on. It wasn't finished programming. Those rights belonged to other people who exploited them in whatever way they wanted to. So I sold this 12,000 hours of content, and quite honestly, the valuation was complete finger in the air. There was absolutely no way of attributing a value to 12,000 hours of video content. We knew what it was. We knew what was on what tape or which LTO, which digital file it was. But that was about as much information as we had in order to achieve a valuation. So needless to say, I now, several years later, think that I sold the business for nothing. It was crazy. I now know that if I'd had the metrics that we've built in my new business, that valuation would have been an entirely different thing. And the thing that was missing was the opportunity to put a value on every single second of video. So that's what I went out and found some incredibly clever technical people to build. I had assumed that you could run video content through some kind of system and it would say, this is what is in this shot and in this shot and the next shot, and that just didn't exist. There are some very clever computer vision softwares and all sorts of things that are now in the sort of latter stages of development and becoming quite ubiquitous in our experience of life. But in 2018, 17, 18, they didn't exist. So we built a system that basically allows for the valuation and trading of video content. So your video content shot on your mobile phone and yours shot on your mobile phone is valued in exactly the same way as something that Steven Spielberg shoots or Sky shoots at a sports event. And the idea of the new business is that we are, at the end of next year, launching a consumer platform which allows absolutely everybody to trade their content in a totally democratized environment. So that's what we set out to build. It doesn't exist. It was solving a very real problem that I had experienced when selling a previous business, and certainly something I'd experienced every single day during the course of running a production-driven business. People would stand there saying, I know we've got a shot of the Eiffel Tower in the spring at sunrise, and nobody could ever find it. Another anecdote I tell people, we worked on the Qatar 2022 World Cup bid, and there was one particular film that was used in the latter stages of the bidding process where it was during Ramadan. We were in the desert shooting this scene. We had 200 Bedouins, 16 camels. We had a helicopter with a camera rig. We had helicopters behind rocks. We had a helicopter with a jib arm on a tracking vehicle. I think that single shot probably cost somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. None of that material was ever used in anything that Qatar 2022 made. Ended up on the cutting room floor. We shot Lawrence of Arabia and it's never been seen. Now the value of that content is enormous, and that can be used by whoever needs to use it in a Shutterstock, Getty, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Canva kind of model. So I pivoted from, and I hope you'll ask me lots of meaningful questions about life as a founder. I think the context might be quite important. But so that was where I started, was this business-to-business environment, which I understand. I know how to do that. But this journey of being a startup in the business to, or not even the business to consumer space, the direct to consumer space, where the consequence of scale is on an entirely different level. The valuation metrics of the business, the priorities of the business. I'm interested you talk about marketing and understanding your personas and all that sort of thing. I mean, we've had endless debates in the first 2 years of the business as to whether we should put our marketing foot forward, tell the world we exist and hope that the technology catches up, or build the technology and wait to tell the world we exist, which compromises the ability to onboard content and therefore customers, which makes a very different metric for your VC conversations. The consumer market is a Rubik's Cube that I had never, ever, ever previously anticipated. Business to business, nice and simple. Those of you who are contemplating serving other businesses with your entrepreneurial ventures, good for you. You've made the right choice. But it is terrifying every single day. I love it. It's absolutely amazing. But I think one has to love fear. You have to love that feeling of never being quite in control, of the answer being just outside your reach. And that to me is what life as a founder is all about. The consequences of that, the fallout of that, the impact on one personally and everything else can sometimes be debilitating. But then the upsides are so elevated that it doesn't matter anymore. So, I mean, that's my story, having come from a pretty successful business-to-business environment to now being on this journey towards building what is basically a video content stock exchange. And it's frightening. Frightening and so much fun. And I definitely couldn't do a 9-to-5 job. Over to you.
It's so fitting that as I was sitting there, I got an email from one of my employees who's having a full-on mental breakdown. Has just sent me the craziest fucking thing I've ever read. And now I'm freaking out about that. So that's cool. So I grew up as a ballet dancer. I went to the Royal Ballet School, and then I was like, don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go and try absolutely everything under the sun. Started doing philosophy of science, fell in love with computer science, fell in love with building stuff, did business strategy consultancy, helping businesses who are kind of in the medium-sized space go into that high growth phase, usually by building teams of highly skilled freelancers to get them over that hurdle. Then I ran a media and arts company to help young and emerging artists build successful businesses around their craft, and I founded a few charities that focus on disadvantaged and at-risk children. Throughout all of that, I touched on a plethora of interesting people doing interesting things, which is what led me to the venture that I'm currently doing, which is Underpinned. I'm effectively building systems for the future of work to try and help people build successful freelance independent businesses and ultimately underpin the infrastructure that will form the foundations of the blended workforce in the future. I shan't bore you with my business. I also work as an advisor for early stage startups with a particular focus on diversity and how we can create better access to building a startup successfully. The single best attribute you can have as a startup founder currently is still being a white man, which was sick for me and not great for many other people. So I look at really how we access building those networks. I think the network point that you made is really important because ultimately your success is almost always and almost completely founded on your network's worth rather than yours. So I thought I'd touch on a few points. Oh, the one other thing that I'm doing now, which is really fucking cool, is I've just founded a thing called the Association for the Future of Work, which is an organization of organizations, all of the leading bodies, companies, policymakers, journalists, think tanks around the world who are building systems around the future of work, which was founded last week and is really exciting. I'm just going to reel off a series of bullet points that I just wrote down, which I think might be slightly useful. When I started doing the advisory work, the reason that I did it was not because I was interested in doing the advisory work itself. The diversity and access thing was a really interesting and important issue to me. But the main reason was, if you're doing a startup, you can learn how to do it one time. And the only way you will learn how to do it is by doing it. I have never, ever, ever, ever met an entrepreneur who has listened to any of the advice they got before starting a business. They learned because they did it. So I did the advisory work so that I could do it 10 times at the same time and try and learn a lot more, a lot faster. So talk to everybody else who is building a business and hear about their problems because they're the problems that you're going to have in some way, some form, in some format or whatever it is. Number two, people suck and they need constant support. I have never worked with somebody who is easy to work with. My business partner, who's my best friend, I've hated from large parts of my business. There is not a single employee who has not made me cry at least twice. I've never worked with somebody that I've liked all the time, and probably the biggest issue faced by you building a successful company is managing people and leading people. The best entrepreneurs do a relatively small amount of work really well. The thing that they do amazingly is leading other people in doing work really well, which is emotionally absolutely exhausting. What else? Investors are like very powerful young children in a sweet shop who know nothing about the sweets that they're trying to buy. I have never met an investor with genuine domain expertise, no matter how much they try to spout it. They tell you they have domain expertise because they look at your domain, but in the UK specifically, 80% of VCs have never been operators, which means they have almost no idea what it's like to operate and have never been through that emotional torment. So treat them like children in a sweet shop. They all want the sweet that the richest and most powerful child is holding. What else? You can't share. I think somebody made a comment about that, like you cry in a shower by yourself because you can't share. It's true, but you can find people to share with. Somebody, when I very like early on in the entrepreneurial path, somebody said to me, you need to treat your head like a Formula One car. It cannot just go around the track continuously forever. You need to have a plethora of support around you. Have people that you trust and can talk to who are just totally outside of your world, because you'll spend so much time miserable that it's worth having people that you can just go and sit down and talk to and cry to, whether that's family members, although they tend not to be very good at it. It's usually kind of like distant friends who you can then burn after reading. And I think the second point to that is you do feel alone a lot of the time because you're in control. You're like constantly having to be somebody who presents themselves as completely confident when you are not. The most successful attribute of you winning at conversations, whether that's with VCs and other investors, with business partners, with partnerships, is your ability to be confident in that room. And you have to do that. So you have to find outlets where you don't have to be confident. Cool. be confident, you can't do it alone. I think something that no one ever says to early stage entrepreneurs is you don't want investment. The ideal scenario is no investment. All of the people that I do advisory work with, bar like maybe one or two, and I've done it with about 50 companies. I work in the period of like day one up until 100 million, and then I can't really help you anymore. But the kind of, they almost all have this attitude of how do I get access to the money? And so they base milestones and attributes and metrics on how they can access the money. Build a banging business, you'll get access to the money. The metrics that will be purported by VCs particularly, who are the worst of the bunch, will be like a very specific set of very standardized metrics of how they measure companies at particular stages. They won't be, I'll shut up in a second. They won't be good formats of measuring the success of your business. The success of your business, if it is in any way novel, will be measured by the attributes that you understand about your market. And if you are genuinely doing something cool and exciting in a market, then only you will really have that understanding. Your job is to convince other people of why those attributes are exciting. One of the main reasons that I founded the Association for the Future of Work is that my company's metrics are way below the company's stage, age, and valuation. That's a fact, because the future of work is still in the future. And therefore, I can't realistically succeed as commercially in the commercial way I would like to from a metrics perspective. Yeah, I know that to be true. So I need to find other formats. Easiest format for me was proving to all of our investors that I personally am leading the future of work as a global movement by getting all of the organizations in the room for the first time. That was a metric that then became incredibly important to investors. They went, this business is exciting, even though its customer base and commercials don't make sense from a Series A perspective. Is there anything else? Yes, one more thing, and then I'll shut up. One of the things I teach freelancers as well as startups, which has kind of been alluded to, is this idea of fail fast. The activity of success, same thing about the experiments, is failing as fast as humanly possible. Actively seeking criticism as much as humanly possible. I feel very lucky that I grew up as a ballet dancer for like very few reasons, but one is that you're constantly told that criticism is a gift, and it's so painful to hear when you're like 7 and doing 5 hours of ballet a day. But now it's like, that's really cool. You have no ability to improve when you don't make mistakes. When a campaign in my company is doing really well, it is very, very annoying because there is nothing about it that I can change meaningfully, and there's nothing about it I can test meaningfully. Anytime something doesn't work, not only do you have the opportunity to improve it, but you also have this exciting opportunity to brainstorm, which is by far the most fun part of running a company. My favorite thing recently, which is a really dark thing to say, is when one of my team has had to go for some reason, and I get to jump in and do their job for a bit, because it means I'm not talking to the sweet shop kids. All right, that's what I want to say. But I think that the kind of fundamental thing here is that you have no clue what's going to happen at all, even slightly, and there's no way you're going to take any of the advice on actually when you go and do it, because when you're in the moment, you just make mistakes, and it's good to make mistakes, but talk to as many people as humanly possible and make as many mistakes as quickly as humanly possible.
I am going to make the point that I'm delighted to see a diverse audience and such an amazing sort of concentration of women. A point I'd quite like to make, and I hope that you will take this as encouragement. In my previous business, I never, ever, ever experienced any sort of gender discrimination. I used to poo-poo women who said that it was tough to be a woman in business. It's like, oh, you're doing it all wrong. I can honestly tell you that this time round, where the business is about tech and consumer, my last business, I was a creative chick. I was allowed to be a creative chick. I just happened to be quite good at it and ran quite a successful business. That was fine, I was indulged. This time round, with a very kind of seriously driven tech, consumer-focused business, I take back every single criticism. It is damn tough. You were talking about feeling grateful about being a white man and the VCs. Somebody won a race 9 months before you were born. Anyway, you won a race 9 months before you were born. It's quite extraordinary. There is an expectation that you are somehow, you don't get your own business. And I find it extraordinary. And I would just like to encourage every woman in this room, and also the men in this room, to really support one another in breaking down that ridiculous perception that does exist, which 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when I started on this journey, I just wouldn't have believed you. But it is brutal.
What's your advice then for women in here that are going into their own businesses if they are tech, and on the flip side for men that are in tech, what can they do to help the situation?
Well, I think men going into businesses that are tech and proper businesses, not creative, fluffy businesses. I think there is a vernacular that is tried and tested and works, and it's solid. My advice to the women would be to support one another. I think we all, and by the way, I'm very happy to make myself available. I think it's so important to be able to debrief on a meeting you've had with short story, we basically closed we signed a term sheet on a Series A in February. Small issue of a skirmish in Eastern Europe that broke out, and some SPAC stuff that's, driven everything off the rails. But the interesting thing is, going through that journey, I have felt my gender and the sort of the sense that, you're not that important to me. So I am here, if you want to talk about those moments where things are absolutely horrible and you come off a call and think, oh my God, I feel unbelievably patronised, and I'm not particularly a shrinking violet, I'm not frightened to push back. But you come off and you want to be able to talk to people. You want to be able to say, just to somebody who's been through it, and say, I can't believe what just happened. I've just had this ignorant tosser say this to me, and getting that off your chest, I think, is so, so, so important. And also, don't go back, don't beg. It's just not worth it. Anyway, sorry, I stood on a soapbox there that I hadn't intended to at all.
The only uniquely identifying factor of a successful freelancer is very similar to that of a successful entrepreneur. It's their network. So successful freelancers have one of two things: a successful network or a successful system for building a network. The things that build successful freelancers are exactly the same as the thing that builds successful startup entrepreneurs and businesses, just on a smaller scale. The 5 questions that you have to have answered are: what do you do, what problem do you solve, who do you solve it for, how do you solve it, and why are you the person to solve it? If you can answer those 5 questions in a meaningful way, that means you can identify the people that you should be talking to and the networks that you should be building. The sustainability of your business will be based on the answers to those questions and the kind of efficacy of your plan to approach the answers to those questions. The model of building a freelance business is a really cool one if you want to be a startup entrepreneur, because it allows you to start doing all of these things and learning how to build a business. I've never had a job. I admit I'm 26, haven't had much of an opportunity, but everything I've done has always been in a freelance or founder or director capacity, because it allows you the space, time, and right, I guess, to just do whatever the fuck you want. And that's how you build something exciting, but it's a lot more hard work. I actually think that, interestingly, about the future of work, no one's going to go into a normal job anymore, mostly because normal jobs don't look like normal jobs. Historically, jobs have been time-based things, born out of the Victorian era where you go in and you do something for a certain amount of time and you're paid for that certain amount of time. Due to automation, the use of communication technology, jobs are now value-based projects. And whether or not you do that value-based project on a long-term basis as an employee or you do it as a freelancer doesn't really matter. You should be focusing on what is your value-based project. You're not selling your skills ever to anyone. You're selling a solution to a problem that somebody has, and you need to be able to articulate that as a commercial proposition by answering the 5 questions that I articulated. If you want to learn more, you can use Underpin, my company.
I can go first. Massively is the answer. I think day-to-day and bigger picture. I think it shapes your life as a whole, and day-to-day it almost feels like you're always in the wrong place at the wrong time, sort of thing. So the business needs more of your time, and family will always need more of your time. So I think it's about balancing that, but also realizing no one ever balances that. I think it's being a little bit easy on yourself and giving the love where it's needed at the right times. But the answer is massively. I don't know.
I got a lot of friends who came to me when I started doing the advisory work, and they didn't want advice about their business. They just wanted advice on how they could keep having friends.
Yeah.
And they were all just like, I don't have any friends anymore, and the friends I really liked, I don't see. And I noticed the thing that I found hardest in like the second year of this company was I kept getting texts and calls from my friends who I thought were my friends asking me for favors. And I was like, why is it the only time they ever talk to me is when they really need something or they need me to help them with their business or whatever else it is? And I realized because I was totally unavailable the rest of the time. So the only time they thought they could talk to me was if they had something really important to ask. And I didn't really see that. So I've tried much harder to change that, but you will forego relationships to build exciting things. And I'm a very social person who goes out a lot, likes to party a lot and goes out and does stuff, but you will forego building lots of meaningful relationships in order to focus on things. That doesn't mean you can't meet lots of interesting people and do lots of interesting things, but you might find at some point you feel like you have a lot of acquaintances and not a lot of friends.
Caroline, anything from you?
I think, I'm approaching my life very differently with the new venture with Agoli than I did last time round. And I think I feel like the old woman in the room here, but definitely I am so much more disciplined, and I know that sounds a bit cold in terms of relationships. I am much more disciplined this time around about making time and space for myself as well as for others, because you can't ask your closest friends and family for advice or real support in a business. It's not fair to give them that burden, but you absolutely need to be able, I think, to spread your need for support across people you really care about and who you trust and you love and you have a deep relationship with. So having a discipline of maintaining relationships and friendships, I think, is really important. And I've made a really clear sort of commitment to myself and to my family and friends this time around.
I think that's why at the Founder Network, why we put the documentary together. I just don't think anyone's talking about it. I think when we hear about businesses struggling or going out of business, you often hear that it's because of cash flow. But that's like saying everyone dies of heart failure. Like, it's not, there's a reason behind that, and I would put a fairly large bet on a lot of that being personal, whether it's mental health, whether it's pressures externally, whatever it is that leads to those cash flow issues. So I think it's really important if you're going into business just to be aware of that and make sure you do look after yourselves as well.
It's really important as a founder as well, just in terms of health. Don't forget how absolutely critical and central you are to creating this thing. And if you're not healthy physically and mentally, it's not going to happen. So it sounds like another job to do, but I think it's really, really important to focus on those things. Super important. And to your point about building networks, you have an amazing support network here. And appreciate that and value that and hold on to it even after the course is finished would be my advice.
I'm working on 13 businesses at the moment. So I advise 12 startups. Between the smallest is worth $1 million and the largest has just hit 100 million. So I have to tell them to fuck off. But I have Underpinned, which is my project. That's the thing that I commit the majority of my time to. That's the thing that is my company. It's actually not currently the most valuable one that I'm working on, but it is the thing that I'm most interested in. I think the process is much more of a process of elimination than it is a process of inclusion, in that I think the best way to build a business is to approach every single conversation you have with every single person as an entrepreneurial opportunity to solve problems. And which is why I think it's so cool that you can talk to each other, because you'll all have problems that you'll solve, and you may end up being way more excited about someone else's business than you are about yours. What I find is the biggest leading indicator of failure is trying to keep many things alive without ever testing the veracity of anything. The kind of like, the theory of God idea of like, if you can't disprove it, then it's still real. And I think it's very similar. If you don't ever put it to the test, you'll never disprove it. And it's very similar with freelancing, because if you meet people who have multiple skills, they're like, I don't want to choose between them, I want to do them all. That's fine. But you can't pitch all of them to everyone, or you'll always fail and you'll always not fail. You've got to choose a couple, give them a go, and then go, okay, that worked kind of well. I'm actually going to do 3 of them at the same time because I can balance it. But they're all very individual propositions. At some point, you will have to make decisions about which ones you work on. So for example, I have a very strict rule that I never do more than 5 hours of consultancy a week, which means 5 one-hour consultancy sessions with 5 startups on a rolling basis, 12 over the course of 2-3 weeks. Everybody gets a go. But you'll find the things that you're most passionate about, and the others tend to fuel your kind of entrepreneurial problem-solving mindset, and the one that you tie yourself to is the one that you're passionate about, which does not have to be the most successful one. And like what this also allows me to do is like the Association for the Future of Work that I've just founded. That's like a really, really, really cool branch of Underpinned that currently has like no commercial value inherently, but it's like a really exciting thing from a PR perspective, definitely banging for my career, but like ultimately it's something that I'm really interested in that is born out of the thing that I'm most interested in. I think the biggest thing is don't try and keep things alive, try and kill things. And if you can't, then maybe you should stick to it for a bit.
I mean, that's advice from someone that's doing multiple things successfully. I guess to give you it from the other point of view, when I was straight out of university, I had 2 ideas that I loved the idea of, didn't have any successful track record behind me, and tried to launch both at the same time. Elon Musk does it, right? So we can do it. They both failed. So I'd say particularly if you're in the earlier stages of your career, like just as Albert's saying, he focuses on Underpinned as number one. Make sure you have your number one. And then once you've got that in a decent place, then maybe look at different things. But yeah, my advice would be to stay away from that.
There's a really, really, really important lesson here, which is that it's okay to take a day off. Like, I know that sounds like a really stupid and simple thing to say, but no one ever does it. And like, if you don't reply to any emails for a day, you get back with like slightly too many emails, which is slightly anxiety inducing, but you come back feeling a lot better. No one gives themselves space, and it's way better. We introduced a 4-day work week in August. We track our point success. We have currently in Underpinned 30 employees. We track every employee's output by a point system, and their productivity has increased almost 3-fold in 6 months. Like, that's a measurable output. I admit there are other factors that have made that true, learning, team, like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the core point was we didn't lose anything overnight by doing that. In fact, we kind of gained something almost immediately. Main reason being, I never do a task more than 40 minutes at a time, ever. Because I know that I won't do it very well. I never really do any substantial work after 6 because I know I won't do it particularly well. There's no point of exhausting yourself. Things move way slower than you want them to move. Taking time off rarely slows it down that much. And I think founder fatigue is usually born out of like helplessness. And that's something you can't avoid. I've run out of money. I've got 48 hours away from running out of money 4 times in just this company. That's when you feel fatigue and you can't avoid it. The rest of the time you can avoid it, and it's your responsibility to avoid it.
But just to that point, which might be a bit of a counter, you're sort of saying the same thing. I think the most fatiguing thing is not when you're actually doing things, it's the spaces between. And that's exactly the same thing. When you're cogitating or worrying about things, or there is a problem you actually can't solve right now, but it's constantly on your mind. And I think, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I think, and this sounds so silly, but diet, exercise, getting out. I do things like fly planes and ride horses and stuff. For me, the only way I can adjust.
Yeah, I want to be able to say that at some point.
Well, you can.
Move to California.
Yeah.
You can't lose concentration when you're riding a horse at speed. You're concentrating on staying on the horse. You can't lose concentration when you're flying a single-engine plane. So to go and do something where well, you can.
You've broken out.
That's so good.
But that's how I deal with it, where basically you have to break this. You somehow have to dissolve the fog that's in your head that makes you tired. That's when I get most tired.
Most entrepreneurs I know are pretty like relentless. I know a lot of people who have come from backgrounds like ballet dancing or music or sport or something because they've had that like complete like discipline. I think it's important to try and find something else you can put that into.
Definitely.
So like when I'm busy, it's like now I just go to the gym for 2 hours in the middle of every day and I still reply to emails, but like when I'm in there, I put in earplugs, I'm in silence, I'm in my own space, and that's all I can focus on. I wish I had more time to do other things and find other things, and I'm trying to look for them, but find like weird things that you can obsess over where you like can't avoid, but focus on it.
Yeah, I think that's right. The other thing I'd point out as well is part of what I've found, just personally found as fatigue, is actually fatigue of those closest to you as well. So again, going back to family, you kind of need to watch that they're getting tired of you working all the time and bringing home stress and this, that, and the other. And once you feel their fatigue, it really adds to your fatigue. So I think you've got to watch that a little bit as well. Cool. Anyone else? I think we've got about 3 minutes. I'm not sure if anyone else has got a...
Who's got a dope finisher?
Well, I'm hoping we haven't terrified you all in your last in your last class. But yeah, just some food for thought, really, isn't it? I think it's all good and well learning about the actual business aspects, but I think you've really got to think about what the realities of life around the business are as well. So please do keep that in mind. I think all three of us are probably happy to have a quick chat if you want to speak afterwards, or shoot us an email or add us on LinkedIn or whatever it may be. Feel free to come to us with any additional questions.
Don't write to me on LinkedIn.
Apart from Albert, he doesn't want you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, find me somewhere else.
And I'm going to give the Founders Network a plug, because I do think, you know, all that stuff that I was talking about earlier about mutual support, there are these networks of people who are in a similar space, and I think it's super important. You
can't do it without.
You absolutely
You can't.
It's so
It's
damn
impossible.
lonely if you try and do it on your own. Just not worth it. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you can't do it without.
So who wants to start a business after this? There's still a few. But thank you for having us, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.